Hello, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Or as Anthony would put it, invest early before this channel goes to the moon. He has not been particularly nice to female journalists. He goes after Ilhan Omar. He's brutal about her. He's vitriolic against Somalia. He goes into the speech and says, anyway, affordability, it's a hoax. The White House is in a bind, Anthony. They don't know how to manage Donald Trump.
Who's going to open the window and scream, I'm mad as hell and I can't take it anymore?
Big question for you. What kind of a Christmas shopper are you? Are you the kind of person that leaves it to the last minute, or have you already got it done?
What do you think, Katty?
Obviously, you haven't even thought about anybody's Christmas present yet.
I'm a very busy man, and I believe in delegation, Katty. Really not that busy, but I thought I would say that to make myself feel self-important.
If you are like Anthony and have left it to the last minute again this year, we have the perfect gift idea for you.
Make someone that you love a founding member, Katty.
Exactly. It is the perfect present for the less organized among us. Mr. Scaramucci. You can schedule it now and it will land in their inbox on Christmas Day.
And listen, the political obsessives, and you know you have them around your dinner table, you know they're going to love this, okay? It's ad-free listening, members-only mini-series, bonus episodes, Q&As, and exclusive weekly newsletters from me and Katty K. It's so good, I'll probably be giving it to my whole family.
Your poor wife.
Listen, she loves The Rest is Politics US. Your friends and family will love The Rest is Politics US too. Just go to therestispoliticsus.com and click on gifts.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Politics US. I'm Katty K.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci. Katty, I just want you to know I'm making calls, Katty. Trillions of dollars of ad revenues are coming in. Trillions. You know, a call here and a call there, and just trillions are coming in. You know, it's just so easy for me. There's so many low IQ people out there, Katty, but not me.
And you're solving wars too, I hear. It's great. You're off in the Middle East. You're fixing a war here. You're fixing a war there.
Yes. Millions of lives have been saved. And
I
took a cognitive test, and I just want you to know I knew the difference between the dog and the cat. I aced the cognitive test. I just have to tell you this, okay? Who's going to open the window and scream, I'm mad as hell and I can't take it anymore? That's what I want to know. Anybody know, right? They're just going to let them continue to rant and rave. This Pocono Mountains thing, I'm sure you want to go into that. I mean, it was ridiculous last night, but... All right, go ahead. What are we going to talk about today? I'm sorry. I just letting you know that I brought in trillions of dollars of ad revenues. While you were sleeping, Katty, I was bringing in trillions.
This is Anthony Scaramucci on jet lag, and I take no responsibility. Okay, guys, today on the show, we are going to talk about this sense of disconnect between reality and Trump's view of the world. He was out last night giving a long speech in Pennsylvania, all about the state of the economy. His team had said, we're going to get out there and we're going to talk about this thing that is such a political liability to us, and we are going to address affordability. Well, we'll get into how that actually went down in a second. Maybe the team not as happy today as they might have been beforehand. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about Trump getting into business. This is now, again, kind of Oval Office economy at the moment, with Trump getting involved in business, and particularly in the media business and the Netflix Warner Brothers Discovery deal, Paramount deal, and a lot of that about how he wants to control media and particularly control journalists. He has not been particularly nice to journalists, and in particular to female journalists, over the last few weeks, it has to be said. So Donald Trump has gone out on this fixing affordability tour, which the White House staff have come up with because they realized from recent elections in New Jersey and New York and Virginia that they have a problem on this messaging around affordability. Americans think the prices are too high, and why isn't the White House doing more about it? And so they come up with this idea, we're going to do a tour, we're going to get Donald Trump out there around the country, he's going to be seen in the heartland in all of these battleground states, and that is going to help us fix this messaging problem. But the problem is there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the reality of the economy and how Donald Trump sees the American economy, or as he would perhaps put it, how he sees his economy. And the two came clashing into each other in a rather spectacular fashion at this speech that I'm not sure the White House staff will be incredibly happy with. They've now got a real problem on their hands. Do they get him out more or do they get him on the sidelines? Because I'm not sure he fixed anything. But let's just give a little bit of the context to people. Here is a Politico poll that came out, was held in mid-November. It just came out yesterday. It's great timing. And I'm going to give you a few numbers on it, Anthony, because I think it's worth people understanding what the state of the American economy is, or how people see the state of the American economy, before we get into what Donald Trump says it is, and then we can see if there's a bit of an Alice in Wonderland situation going on. So almost half of Americans are saying at the moment that groceries, utilities, healthcare, housing and transport are hard to afford. Let's run through a couple of them. Half of Americans say that it's hard to pay for food, and a majority of those people are blaming Donald Trump. Quarter of Americans say that they have skipped a medical checkup recently because of the cost of them. A quarter of Americans say they've also skipped taking a prescription drug for the same reason, too expensive. A third are saying they can't afford to attend a sports game with their family or friends this holiday season. And a half say they can't afford to go on any kind of a holiday that involves a flight. So that's some pretty, I think that's quite good data, isn't it? I think it's quite useful in the context of this conversation that we have that political poll saying what people are feeling. Because that doesn't seem to me what Donald Trump thinks the economy is looking like.
Well, listen, when I read the data, it breaks my heart because there's stress in that data and there's economic unhappiness in that data. There's no question.
When you're missing a medical checkup and you're missing your pills because you can't afford them, that is heartbreaking.
Or you're not going to the dentist.
That's tough.
And your teeth are related to your heart and all the different things that are going on. And so, my heart goes out to those people, and it's got to be high anxiety. But listen, I'm not the president's communications director anymore, and I was only there for 11 days. But this was an abomination last night because if you're there to talk about affordability and you're there to reframe the issue, you bring Besant out there. I watched that part of the speech. I thought he did reasonably well. He came with some facts, Scott. Some areas are doing better. The bond market is actually U.S., we're down a tick or two with the idea that the rates are going to get cut today. I mean, there's an 85% expectation that rates get cut this afternoon in the United States. We're recording this at 8 a.m., but I don't think we're going to have to re-record it because they're going to cut rates 25 basis points, and they've more or less signaled that to the market. And there's enough dissension among the governors where they're not going to 0 or they're not going to 50. So I'll eat my hat, but I don't have a hat, but I would eat my hat if I'm wrong about that. But man, you're talking about high levels of racism again, right? He's promoting, you saw the whole thing he said about the dirty Haitians and Afghanistan and Somalia are filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime. Contrast those to the Scandinavian nations. Did you watch all that?
Why don't we? It was 97 minutes long, which is long even by Trump standards. It was very rambling. He did go back to the teleprompter at some point and put in some of the lines about the economy, but he even boasted about the fact that he was barely reading the prompter in front of him. And when he wasn't reading the scripted lines, he goes back to his favorites, right? This was an election-style Donald Trump rally where he goes for all of the hot-button cultural issues. He talks about trans issues. He goes after Ilhan Omar, the Democratic congresswoman from Somalia who came here as a refugee. He's brutal about her. He's vitriolic against Somalia, filthy, dirty, disgusting. He confirms that he called African countries shithole countries. And there's a moment, Anthony, where there's a guy in the background who's kind of laughing because the whole premise of Trump is that he says things that, are unpolitically correct, and that he says things that people are thinking, but they don't dare to say out loud, and he doesn't care. He's going to say it out loud. But it was really interesting watching this one guy as he says the line about Somalia and the people being filthy and the shithole countries. He's kind of grinning, but he's also shaking his head like it's too much. And you wonder what even his supporters make when he goes that far off the reservation. There's another point in the speech where he says the Afghan guy who shot the National Guards woman just before Thanksgiving, and he says, and this is crazy, right? The doctors are fighting to save his life just so that we can put him to death. And then he kind of catches himself and says, oh no, I suppose that's the American system. They'll tell me that's the beauty of the American system, but he thinks it's crazy that the doctors are actually doing their job. A lot of the speech was about that, cultural things.
Let me tell you what I heard. And let me tell you what I saw. And let me tell you why I think these speeches may have helped him in a campaign, but will likely not help him right now. So I heard three things. I heard that my tariffs are burying the economy. I heard that inflation is a sticky 3%. Prices are rising in my administration over the last 10, 11 months. They're not going down. I'll pretend to you and lie to you and say that they are, but they're really not. I heard, and he said this, that he's thinking about floating a 10% universal tariff. And he went back to the 60, 100% tariffs on the Chinese. And the Chinese have really done something interesting here. He approved the chips, Katty, and then the Chinese said, yeah, we probably don't want your chips because we have to decouple from you. So I don't know. If you're with the guy, you're going back to Air Force One and telling him, you did amazing. You're the best, Mr. President. We got to get you out there more. 97 minutes wasn't enough. But I think the data is telling you, Katty, that it's not working, that he's maybe galvanizing elements of his base, particularly those that are racially charged, but he's not getting to the moderates. He's not getting to the independents. He's not getting to the people who have told journalists that they're missing dental appointments and missing prescription drugs. He's not getting to those people with these sorts of speeches. And so anybody in the White House telling him the data, or they're just saying, hey, man, just go crazy, have at it. Rip up the journalists when you want. The one woman, Katty, you're a journalist, so the one woman repeats the exact words that he said 5 days earlier, and he calls her fake news and low IQ, and he starts demeaning her. I didn't mean that. I didn't say that. Right? It was about the video.
That's this reality perception disconnect that we seem to be living in. And what's ironic about this speech is just before it, he gives an interview with Politico, a 45-minute on-camera interview, and the reporter asks him, what do you think of the state of the economy, Mr. President? He says, it's an A+. And she says, A+. And he says, no, A++++++, 5 pluses. So he prefaces a whole speech about affordability in which he's meant to be expressing empathy for the problems of Americans who are facing affordability issues by saying, actually, guys, I don't buy any of this because my economy, the economy of Donald Trump, is A+++++, 5 pluses he is giving himself just to double down on that. And then he goes into the speech and says, anyway, affordability, it's a hoax. It's a phrase coined by Democrats. Now we're all meant to be talking about affordability. It's another hoax. He compares it to the Russia hoax. It's Russia, Russia, Russia. And then he says, actually, okay, the way to address the affordability crisis is the way I'm doing it with my China tariffs. You don't need $30 at Christmas, which I actually happen to agree with. You only need $2 or $3, or you only need a couple of pencils. But he's not, in this speech, he's not addressing the things that are worrying Americans. He's saying, you just have to buy less dolls. You just have to buy less pencils. So it's a kind of weird Jimmy Carter-esque austerity speech from a guy who I don't think his own grandchildren are only going to be getting $2, as a Democratic senator pointed out this morning, at Christmas. And as they left the stadium, the New York Times interviewed some of his supporters who were at that rally, and they're saying, a couple of the ones that were quoted in the New York Times, I'm offended by the idea that it's a hoax. I could stop eating, I suppose, one of them says, because my groceries are so high, but he's not taking me seriously. And I think that is a problem for him. You've already got polling saying that his supporters don't buy that tariffs are going to help the economy either in the short term or in the long term. But it's a president who seems to be mocking his own supporters' concerns. I mean, maybe this is going to work for Republicans in the midterms, but if I'm a Republican member of Congress in a vaguely precarious seat listening to that last night, I'm not saying, please, Mr. President, will you come and give that speech in my district?
No, you're not. But also, it doesn't square with the economic reality, right? So let's just go over this. Wages since the beginning of the year, and again, I'm not picking on him, by the way. He's the one that's trying to take credit in personalizing the economy. I did this, I did that, I did this, but the wages since the beginning of the year are down. Real wages in the country are down, adjusted for inflation, 0.7%. So the inflation's up. But Katty, if you are an economist and you take a basket of goods and you say for a family to have quote unquote affordability, 30% of their salary has to go towards housing, no more than that. Because if it's 50, Katty, it starts to creep into the dental appointments and the prescription drugs. Okay, and so in order to do that now in the United States, the average family has to make $121,000 a year. Okay, and you know that that's way higher in Washington, D.C. and way higher in New York. I'm just talking about the average family in the 50 states. So, Katty, the median income for the U.S. families now, $84,000. So that means half of the families in the United States are making less than that. And so this is a problem. And this is there's no income growth. Consumer sentiment is down. The index dropped from 53 at the beginning of the year to 51. And so, okay, well, let's go on a tour and tell people things are great, buy less dolls, but this is what's really going on in the economy. And I'll just say this to you. I know we have to take a break, but I'll just say this to you. Where is the opposition? Where is the colorful, charismatic candidate from the left or the centrist Democrat that actually gets to a microphone and says, hey, here's the goods? You know, when I was a kid, Reagan had like props. He took out a US dollar and he took out 36 cents and he said, you know, this dollar has got 36 cents worth of purchasing power 25 years from now. But there's nobody challenging Donald Trump.
Okay, I think I'm going to push back on that a bit because actually I think the Democrats have had a pretty good few weeks. They're loving what they're hearing last night. They are making the juxtaposition every morning. They were doing it again on television between saying, you know, he can lie about a lot of things, how much money Saudi Arabia is going to invest in the US or whatever, or he's bought peace in 10 countries or however many war zones it is, but he can't lie about what people are feeling about the economy. And they had a couple of wins. I mean, they've had a win this week on Tuesday in the election in Miami. They elected a Democratic mayor of the city for the first time in 3 decades. They flipped a ruby red state house seat in Georgia. I spoke to a Republican this morning who said to me, look, there have been 6 state house races. So the state legislatures have their own House and Senate, and those have races every year. There have been 6 of those races around the country this year. The average swing to Democrats is 13 points. And that's pretty much unprecedented and heralds this idea of a wave. So I think Democrats have found the issue. They can run on the issue of affordability. What they haven't found is the national charismatic leader. They found a leader in New York City who is very charismatic and ran on this issue successfully. He's not a national figure. But that process begins when you start, I think, having the primaries and you pay a lot more attention to it. And some of them are jockeying for that. But I think if Democrats can and the woman who ran in Miami, the new mayor-elect Eileen Higgins, what did she run on? She ran on, guess what? Cost of living. She ran on affordability. Won back a seat, a mayorship they haven't managed to have for 3 decades. So I think the Democrats have found a message. They haven't found a national figure yet, but I think they can find that during the primaries. I just think I think the White House is the way he was talking about his own White House staff last night at the rally in the Poconos, saying, my staff told me to give this speech of my chief of staff, even throws Susie Wiles on the brush, is writing this stuff and telling me to talk about affordability. They told me not to talk about the border, and then he goes on and talks about the border. His staff, they know, have a problem.
He called her Susie Trump. Did you catch that? He called her Susie Trump 4 times because he's passed his cognitive test. And then he realized he called her Susie Trump 4 times. He said, and some would say and even call her Susie Wiles. I mean, he's really a piece of work. So I want to just talk 30 seconds on the Fed. Is that okay?
Yeah, we've had a lot of movement around the Fed this week. It looks like there is a new Fed chair, although it's not been announced. But probably Donald Trump is going to lean on whoever is going to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve to bring those interest rates down as quickly as possible, isn't he?
I'll just say that if you had asked me on Friday, I would have said Kevin Hassett has the job. But the way Washington works, one of the guys running for the job is actually running for the job. He's not sitting there trying to get selected. And so he's using lobbyists and he's using all different types of people to influence the administration. So we now have an interview sweepstakes that's going to happen this week that wasn't going to happen last week.
Don't you love the way Trump announces all of this? Like it is The Apprentice. It's the Fed chair version of The Apprentice.
Yeah, well, he likes it because it's exciting for him. But I think a couple of lobbyists got greased to keep this game afoot. But I think it'll be Hassett. And I'll just say to people, if you want to really learn about Kevin Hassett, he wrote a book 25 years ago with James Glassman, who was actually an economic advisor to the two Bushes, George W. and George H.W. And the title of the book, Katty, was Dow 40,000. And at that time, the Dow was at 9,000, and people were aghast and said, this is a ridiculous book. But if you actually read the book, and Hassett wrote most of it, the book really gives you a really good rendition of how he thinks about monetary policy. And so I think he'll surprise people. I think, yes, he'll lower rates and it'll make the president happy, but he won't overly lower rates to cause a crisis in the bond market. Waller would also be a good pick. Kevin is a good guy, Kevin Warsh, the other Kevin in the race. But if I were a betting man right here, right now, even though we're going to go through the sweepstakes, I do think Hassett is going to be the Fed chair.
I would put my money on Hassett too.
He knows the president the best. And therefore Trump will trust them the most.
Yes, he's working inside the White House, and he was in the White House in the first term as well. He's one of the few hangovers from the first time. I remember going to a dinner with Kevin Hassett, and it was one of those kind of Washington dinners. It was early on in the first term, and Trump was up on the stage and he was being roasted. It was that kind of a black tie gala dinner where you roast the politicians. And Hassett was grinning and laughing. And then he suddenly saw that Trump was looking at him, and he leaned over to me and said, "Shoo, I better take this smile off my face. The boss is watching." So he knows which way to play Donald Trump. And I think The Economist is asking, which Kevin Hassett will we see? The Kevin Hassett who wrote the book about the Dow, or the Kevin Hassett who has become more of a sycophant to Donald Trump recently in support of his interest rate quest. So that is the sweepstakes this week on the Fed. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about the media, how Donald Trump is talking about the media, and more importantly, what Donald Trump wants from the media and from big business deals. We have some very exciting news. General sale is now on for our live show in London next September, on the 6th of September. We do hope we're going to see you there. Go to southbankcentre.co.uk and look for Rest is Fest. Tickets are selling fast. If you want to get one for your loved ones for Christmas, we recommend doing it soon. Otherwise, poor old Father Christmas might be rooting around up in northern Finland trying to find a ticket to the South Bank show and trying to find a ticket to the Rest is Politics US, and all he comes up with is a doll, which Donald Trump says you don't need anyway. So go and buy those tickets right now. We are going to do this half talking about business and media and journalism and Donald Trump's relationship with all of those things. But let's start on the business deal that is rocking Hollywood and actually rocking Washington and the White House at the moment too. And that is the deal to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. You're the business person, Andy. You explain what's happening.
I want to start with Paramount. So Paramount was put up for sale. The Ellison family through Skydance bought Paramount. There was some dysfunction on the Warner Brothers Discovery merger. So it merged about 18 months ago. Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, who's running it, has been under fire. And so he said, okay, no problem. We'll put it up for sale. And it's triggered a bidding war. The Ellisons want it. They want to merge it into Paramount. That would be good for the movies, Katty, because David Ellison wants a movie to streaming model, which is more or less in existence now. But Netflix wants it. Netflix would like to take the properties of Game of Thrones, DC Comics, Superman, all of that stuff, and throw it up on its streaming and make itself the most powerful. It is already, but make itself an even more powerful streaming behemoth. And so that's going on, but then there's some political intrigue going on as well, because the Netflix guys, they're tied into the Obamas. They're very, very liberal. And the Paramount guys, they're tied into the Trumps and Jared Kushner. And they're telling Donald Trump they'll do what he wants with the news organizations. And so you've got a political fight going on, and you've got a Hollywood fight going on, and you've got the future of media and movie production also going on at the same time. And so I'm going to talk like a Wall Streeter here for a moment and say that this is going to go into a bidding war. I don't think Netflix gets it at $83 billion when there's a $108 billion bid on the table. My old mentor, Mario Gabelli, 85 years old now, running a multiple billion-dollar fund called Gabelli and Company, said he's ready to tender his shares, but this is the 5th round of a 10-round boxing match, Katty. And so I predict they will slug it out. Now, if I'm forced to make a prediction, I do believe that the Ellisons will be able to buy this. I'm here in the Middle East right now in Abu Dhabi. I've met with many people that are close to this situation where there's a slate of sovereigns alongside of Jared Kushner that are backing the Ellisons on their bid. And I think they want the asset, and I think they're ready to push up the price if necessary to get the asset. Now, could Netflix afford the asset? Yes, I think they could. But I think strategically they'll go in a different direction.
For Paramount, it's kind of existential, isn't it, Anthony? Because Paramount has seen the writing on the wall. Streaming is going to consolidate. You and I'm paying 10 different streaming subscriptions costs every month. Everybody's pissed off about this. At some point, this industry is going to consolidate, and there are going to be 2 or 3 big players, and you and I will just pay our subscriptions to 2 or 3 big players rather than paying 10 different subscriptions a month. And Paramount realizes it only has a very small streaming service at the moment. If it wants to have a chance of being one of those remaining subscription providers who's still standing at the end of this disruption, it's got to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. I mean, maybe there's another service out there that it can buy, but Warner Brothers Discovery at least gets it on the table.
I would describe it that way. And also the guys here in the Middle East, there's a Disney park getting built here in the UAE. And these guys see this as a big boost to their star power out here and a big boost to tourism. And so I think they're going to ante up alongside of the Ellisons. I think they're going to want to have a piece of this thing. I do think that Trump, despite the bellicosity of his rhetoric and despite his son being involved, I do think this goes to the highest bidder. I'm not saying it's going to go to Paramount because Trump is going to flex it to Paramount. I think it's going to go to the highest bidder. And by the way, Trump is upset about the Marjorie Taylor Greene interview that 60 Minutes did this past weekend, which is a Ellison company. So he's never going to be 100% happy with any of these people. But I think it goes to the highest bidder. And I think that we don't have time on this podcast to talk about the antitrust issues. But Katty, in an old school America, this would not be allowed to happen. Those Mag 7 companies would have been broken up. These companies would not be allowed to merge with each other. They would be more of a consumer protection focus. And also, when you break up companies like this, you create more creativity, you create more innovation. And so this consolidation is not necessarily going to help entertainment or pricing.
I don't know if Paramount or Netflix wins this battle for Warner Brothers. I mean, hostile takeover bids don't have a great track record, but Paramount has been playing a very political card, and that's how this whole story has landed in Washington's purview as well, because David Ellison has been on television on CNBC saying he's so proud of his friendship with Donald Trump. People in the White House have been told that if Paramount manages to take over Warner Brothers Discovery, and Warner Brothers Discovery also owns CNN, that they will remake CNN in a more Trump-friendly image as well. So the reason journalists are interested in this story, you've got 2 important television networks at stake here, news television networks. You've got CBS News and you've got CNN. Donald Trump doesn't like CBS News or CNN very much. He thinks they've been very critical of him in the past. He thought he had fixed the CBS problem when David Ellison bought Paramount, and Paramount installed somebody as the head of news department who is much more Trump-friendly, very pro-Israel. But then, as you say, CBS News ran an interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene in which she criticizes Trump. Trump goes on to Truth Social and says, my God, this is worse than before. I thought the new owners were going to be better, but this is just as bad as the old owners. So he's not happy. Basically, I think what we know is that Donald Trump is only happy with news coverage when it's flattering news coverage of him. CNN is not particularly flattering about Donald Trump. CBS News, even now, is trying to... I know a lot of journalists at CBS. I have spoken to them about this story. They are desperately trying to preserve their independence and show that they are still independent from the White House. And so you get interviews like this Marjorie Taylor Greene interview. But Trump would like to control the news media. And I think we've had another sign of that over the last few weeks in the way that he has been talking about news journalists, and in particular, female news journalists. I'm just going to run through a few things that he's said. He has called Caitlin Collins of CNN stupid and nasty. In mid-November, he called Catherine Lucy of Bloomberg quiet piggy. Mid-November again, he calls ABC News chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce a terrible person. On the eve of Thanksgiving, he called New York Times journalist Katie Rogers ugly, both inside and out. On Thanksgiving itself, he called Nancy Cordes of CBS News a stupid person. He just yesterday called ABC News' Rachel Scott obnoxious, and he's claimed that Weijia Jiang of CBS is also incapable of passing a cognitive test. The White House has been asked about the way that Donald Trump is speaking about journalists, and particularly about female journalists, in the mid of all this media shakeup. And Abigail Jackson from the White House said, President Trump has never been politically correct, never held back, and in large part, the American people re-elected him for his transparency. Mary Trump, by the way, Donald Trump's niece, who's been very critical of her uncle, says that this is all a sign that he's being rattled and feeling a little bit rattled. I don't know why he's going, and I have to credit my female news journalist colleagues for their kind of calm in dealing with this, because if you look at the videotape, and I went through it all last night to make that list, whenever he goes off at them like this in front of television cameras, they just go back to their question. They're not taking the bait. But when you see that, this is in the space of 3 weeks, calling people piggy, ugly, both inside and out, obnoxious. I don't know what to read into it, Anthony, but it's not normal presidential behavior.
No, but I know what to read into it. See, I disagree with Mary Trump. He's sending a message. He's got 200 plus members of the House, 53 senators, and he knows that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, that they hate his guts. She said it on 60 Minutes on national television. She knows, you know, and I know that they hate his guts. And he knows that they hate his guts. And so him talking like that is to stifle them. Because, hey, Mike Johnson, I'll call you low IQ tomorrow too. I'll say mean and nasty things about you tomorrow if you move a finger or move a hair away from me as it relates to what I want to do and when I want to do it. And so this messaging and this constant bellicosity of rhetoric is being done to intimidate. But on the Warner Brothers deal, Katty, it is such a violation of norms. Okay, the president is saying that he's going to intervene and review the deal. It doesn't happen in the United States.
It's not illegal. It's not illegal. He's allowed to say that, right?
But it's a violation of the norms. Moreover, he's supposed to stay out of it. He's supposed to be above it. And by the way, his family members are involved in it, so even more reason to stay out of it, but he won't. And I will tell you this right now, any deal that happens, the Department of Justice, the old school Department of Justice, would sue to block the deal unless there was massive divestitures of the combined assets, because there's a threshold test called the Clayton Act in the United States, and you can't go over. It's 20% in this market, 30% in that market. There's different categories. And this combination, whether it's Netflix or Paramount, it doesn't really matter. The combination puts these guys over that threshold. And so the normal DOJ, the law is such that you'd have to sue. Now, a third party could have standing here if the Department of Justice doesn't sue to get the case to the Supreme Court, because you have to administer the law, Katty. You know, they criticize the Democrats for not administering the law propitiously in the crypto community. And then the crypto community sued the Democrats, actually won the court case. Now the Republicans are doing the same thing. So this is the reason why I am worried that Trump and this current crop of Democrats have changed the game, where they want to break the norms that have actually gotten the capital markets to where they are, gotten to the prosperity to where it is. They want to break those norms. And what it'll turn a lot of Americans into cynics. And they'll turn around and say, see, they're gaming the system for themselves and their buddies. And me and my family can't catch a break. We can't afford our groceries. That's a very bad place to go. And so I hope we don't get there. But I'm telling you right now, the president is, everyone's, he just does that flippantly and he does that. And he doesn't. He thinks about it. He'll tell you privately in his ruminations, I'm going to attack Katty K and use all those terms against her. And it may or may not bother Katty K. I don't care. But it's going to maybe stop the next journalist from asking me the question. And it's certainly going to stop the congressman from going rogue if I'm blasting away at Marjorie Taylor Greene. You see, it's very well thought out. It's not off the cuff. And I know this from my journalistic interactions with the White House and other journalists who interact with the White House. It is planned. He thinks of the terms, he knows when to use them. And if we're seeing lots of them like this in a row over the course of 3 weeks, which is more than we would normally see, and then targeting female journalists, I think, is also planned. That gets the libs riled up. They start calling him a misogynist. He feels that helps him. It plays into the idea of Trump derangement syndrome. And I think it is a strategy. He feels that this helps him. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I'm going to be back reporting on trillions, Katty. I'll be reporting back to you the next time we're together on all the work that I'm doing, just waving my hand. Look, trillions of dollars in advertising revenue. You and I can go and retire and sit on the beach. This is great. Great news. Best news I've had. Like Donald Trump, these are Zimbabwe trillions, where like a $10 trillion note gets you at a taxi across town. Aspirational trillions, maybe. Yes, they could be aspirational trillions, but they're not trillions. But Katty, never mind. I got to tell you, we have normalized the abnormal, and it's very important for me that we at least call it out once in a while. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll, of course, be back with more next week. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.